Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, Merry Christmas.
Oh, thank you so much. How was your time with the family?
It was good. It was relaxing for, a day. and then it's back into the thick of it, right?
Exactly.
Yep. So what we're doing for right now is we're talking about the questions to ask of potential leadership candidates. This is the episode 10, which is going to be the final question we talk about. And then next episode, we'll go through kind of a little wrap up of all of them to kind of tie it off with a nice little bow, no pun intended, before the end of the year. And then we'll start fresh with some new topics after the first of the year. But for this last question that I want to talk about in terms of the importance of asking leadership candidates, the question is, how do you prioritize employee growth? And I like this question a lot because I think it goes back to, we talk about at the beginning, what is your job as a leader, right? Your job as a leader is employee growth. Now, your job as a leader is the bottom line. Your job as a leader is to make sure the P&L statement looks good. I mean, your job as a leader is to finesse scorecards to make them look like they're supposed to look on a moment-by-moment basis. But if you are not, throughout all of this, if all of those things are not in your mind vehicles to grow your employees, then I think there's a losing, you've lost sight of what your role as a leader is. And I'm not talking about from a moral standpoint or like what the right thing to do is, from a standpoint of just getting promoted. If your job is to get promoted or you want to get promoted yourself, you need to be able to make sure that that your business can run in your absence. Because the moment that you give off the impression that the only reason it runs smoothly is because you're there, you will be there forever. And so the employee growth piece to me is kind of key, and it kind of wraps it up nicely.
Absolutely. No, I think and it's such a critical point too. Like, again, it's one of those situations where a lot of times leadership, we talk about the importance of employee growth and development. And what does that mean? But I always think about, some of the best answers I've heard, the ones that I appreciate the most in leaders, are the ones where somebody talks about, helping somebody achieve a personal goal as a result of getting better at their job at work. Like for me, that's the ultimate kind of pull through when it comes to employee development, is that not only are we helping to train them, not only are we helping to role model and coach them on helping somebody get better at their job, but as a result of that, it's opened up doors of opportunity, whether it's through more work, bonuses, more hours, promotions, whatever that might be. And because of that, they've now been able to achieve this thing that they've been really focused on, whether it's, sometimes home ownership, starting a family, buying a car, like just things that, are personal goals that are accomplished through the hard work and perseverance of getting better and better at their job every single day. So for me, that's the ultimate measure in some instances of employee growth and kind of employee development. Yes, there will be title changes. Yes, promotions will happen. Yes, these kind of mile markers of somebody's professional journey will be achieved. But at the end of the day, are we working in such a way that the success that we're having at work is now helping to be more successful in personal life and the goals that people want to achieve? That's really what I like to hear and what I like to talk about when I think about employee growth and development, and how do I prioritize it, and what are the examples that have happened as a result of my leadership.
Right. I think that's so important too, because I couldn't improve on that in any way. In fact, what I was going to say is where I see this question lacking in terms of where people lack in their answers, or when they talk about the employee growth in the context of the organization. Oh, I got 7 people promoted out from under me, or these are the people who have improved on these particular things in the metrics they were struggling to execute well on to begin with. It's like, okay, but that's not a broader mission or vision for that person. That's fleeting. And if you can make somebody kind of buy into getting better on something, I think you're missing the part of where you helped them accomplish something they were looking to accomplish outside of work to begin with, because that's what they locked into. If they improved in something or they got promoted, they weren't getting promoted because they wanted to get promoted. They got promoted because they wanted something else. There was something that this promotion or this advancement was going to help that had nothing to do with the organization. It could be that they wanted to have rent a bigger apartment because their family was growing, or they wanted to buy a house, or they were taking the bus to work because they couldn't afford a car payment and now they can, or whatever the reason is. There's something that has nothing to do with the business that you can then tie into for that particular individual. And I think leaders who really are convincing to me that they prioritize employee growth absolutely tie it in to what individual employees have seen in terms of improvements to their own lives, not just in terms of how they did the job better. And I think one of the things that we can do as leaders in order to kind of start that ball down the right path is to make sure that the right people are cast in the right roles in every location or every organization. And so what I want to ask you is, have you ever had a situation where you had to move a person from one part of the organization to another so that they could start to do their best work, almost like, prioritize the growth in advance of that person, not just being able to like talk to what they were able to do for the scorecard or do well in the role when they were kind of miscast to begin with? But first, I want to give it up to word from one of our sponsors. All right, Lorenzo, have you ever had to move one of your employees from one part of the organization to the other in order to prioritize their growth in advance of them actually doing something well with the scorecard because they were kind of miscast to begin with?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think a few times. I can think of immediately a couple of names that come to mind. I think one of the ones that I think resonates with me most is where I was having a conversation with somebody who was doing extremely well in their current role. A lot of responsibility, a lot of understanding nuance, a lot of just, as we provided this person with more on their plate, they were able to do a really good job with it. And as I was talking to them about their career and their growth, what they had mentioned was they were like, I really enjoy this work. Like, I feel like I'm still continuing to learn and grow here. But like personally, I need to move. I need to leave. I've lived here for a really long time. I've grown up here. I know for me, getting out of this area is going to be really important for my personal growth and for me to achieve some of the goals that I have. And I've been working on many of these things, and I'm willing to take the type of risk. And so what I saw was an opportunity to take somebody who could very easily have continued their growth and development and maybe, had a couple of more promotions underneath the same, business unit and that type of thing that needed more, from a growth standpoint. It had nothing to do with the day job, and they were really, really good at what they were doing. And so we had a dialogue around applying for jobs that they could qualify for, and understanding that you may have to step into a role that you can do, that you might not have a bunch of experience with, that you don't maybe have an education that you can utilize to get in the door. And we had that conversation, and we reached out to some recruiters and asked them to take a look at the resume and the work history. And they said, well, based upon this is kind of the type of role that we would see. And sure enough, this person got a job and moved across the country. And they took an entry-level job and something they had never done before, but they were fully capable of doing. And guess what? We saw the same level of success at that space. And then they worked really, really hard, and they were able to kind of move through a couple of different opportunities. And I just share that as the example because it's rare that you would look at somebody in their development and they're doing a good job for you and then try to think about, well, then what's best for you, and what's best for you may not be working for me. And it's not that I'm not providing you with a level of leadership, but I can't solve that. There's no job I can give you here today that's going to give you the life experience or perspective of leaving your friends and family and really proving to yourself that you can go out there and do this type of thing. So I think that for me is one of the standout examples. And then there's been many times where I've had leaders that I would say were miscast, not in such a way that they were just not great at their job. They were just struggling. They were using every bit of talent and skill they had just to be kind of achieving the minimum expectations of one job. And then you move them into something else that may be more aligned with their natural skill set or interests or passions. And then it's almost like overnight, they become extremely successful. They can become really good. And it wasn't that the responsibility changed much. It really was just allowing them to live somewhere within their strength and within their passions so that they can then commit the time to just executing something versus having to work through all of the other emotional elements of just trying to care about the thing that they were focused on.
Right. When you're able to get by, but it's so draining by the end of the day, that's not sustainable long term. You have to be able to get energy from your job to be able to have it be self-sustaining. If you dread going to work and then you get there and you put on a mask and you're able to kind of get by and you kind of hide the lack of strength that you have around these particular things for your 8 or 10 hours, then you leave and it's like, oh, thank God I got through that day. Yeah, anybody can do that for a week or two or a month or two, but everybody has their breaking point. And so getting people cast in the right role is important. Where I have seen some real positive answers to this question is when a leader has done that kind of movement, even when the minimum expectation of performance wasn't there to begin with, but they were able to separate that out from who that person was as a whole. And so the minimum expectation of how you treat your coworkers, to me, that's a non-negotiable. I don't care how well or not well you think you do your job, or how miscast you think you are, or how much you'd rather do some other element of the job. How you treat people, you have complete control over, regardless of how well you think you're doing in your job. But in situations where I've seen a leader really prioritize employee growth, it has been when that leader has said things like, this person just wasn't succeeding here. They were failing miserably at even the minimum expectation. But I had conversations with them, and I could see how their coworkers who weren't kind of bearing the brunt of their lack of performance, how those people got along with them, and how they were able to show up with a positive attitude at least. And I looked past the lack of performance and said, you know what, it seems like you would do much better in a different role. And we tried it out, and it seemed to work really well, and we moved him into that role. I like situations like that where people take bets on their people based on something more than what a scorecard says, because sometimes you have to do that in order to get people cast in the right role if they weren't cast in the right role to begin with.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And have a great day.